Today on the Daily Review, we discuss oddball faux western, The Missouri Breaks, starring Jack Nicholson, Harry Dean Stanton, and Marlon, what the fuck is going on, Brando. Today, with me, Joe LaRocca, on the Daily Review. You know what stinks is if you want to have a mustache, and then you have one and it looks alright, and people make a few jokes and then they get used to it, and you actually get used to it and like it, and then you shave it off, and then you go, I kind of want to grow that back. Then you have to have this for a little while, which looks like I was kissing a dirty horse, as they say. But in a few days, the magnificent mustache will be back. Anyway, Missouri Breaks. Arthur Penn, who I often get confused with Arthur Miller. But Arthur Penn, he is the man behind one of the most important movies in turning the old Hollywood system around and bringing about new Hollywood, or American New Wave, or whatever you want to call it. And that was Bonnie and Clyde in 1960. I can't remember. I think it's 67. Him and Warren Beatty and some of those other people. What's his name there? The kid stays in the picture. That guy. You know, they had a lot of impact on bringing about that big change. But we're not going to talk about that right now. Maybe if we do that movie or something. So I was like, an Arthur Penn movie. This is on Amazon Prime. And I was like, Missouri Breaks. And so when I saw that title, I think I thought I knew what the movie was about, in the same way that I thought Arthur Penn was Arthur Miller and that he was a playwright. And then they get jumbled in my brain because of whatever learning problem I have. So that would happen. And then I would see Missouri Breaks, and I would think it was about pool. Some sort of like pool grifting movie, which it's not. It's a Western. And it's in the mid-late 70s. There was kind of these interesting Westerns coming out that were, it was probably in a response to the spaghetti Westerns, kind of reinvigorating in the early 70s, the genre, and then kind of responding to that with they're kind of, this has violence in it, but it's not the same thing. And the lead character is softer, and it's about the end of the West, right? How everything is changing and how the law is finally coming out there. The West is so good. It's such a good metaphor to use for America, and you can tell so many great stories because of, it just works as a microcosm very nicely. And this is one of the ones like McCabe and Miss Miller, or maybe even Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Like, they're breaking down the medium. And this is what's so cool about genres. They stack on one another. And then it's about, you're making, it's like a pushback. It's like that Beatles, Beach Boys thing. You influence one another and you ping pong back and forth. And that's why it's good to have, I guess in a capitalist sense, that it's good to have competition there, because it motivates you. And that's what happens with genres, and I think Westerns is one of the more interesting ones. And this is kind of an oddball one, for those reasons that I said. It's kind of a love story. It's very romantic, and it works. Like, the romance works in it really well. And it's also a thing we've been talking about a lot recently. It's not that representational acting. It's more of the realistic, heavily ad-libbed, which is what you get in this time period with Brando. And the directors that are successful in directing him seem to be the ones that don't direct him at all. That just go, fucking do whatever you want, dude. You're so weird, but it's going to be okay. So it's like Jack Nick. It's like a Nicolas Cage a little bit. It's like, if you get the director that knows how to kind of rein him in or whatever, you can get an amazing performance out of him. But if whatever happens when he does those ones where it's like, what's going on here? They're making it in Romania. He makes 8 action movies a year to pay off his horse debts or whatever. Anyway, That's all conjecture. This movie is about. I'll simplify it. Um, Jack Nicholson is an outlaw essentially. He's he's a horse rustler. He steals horses, and they realize if they want to be making better money, they need a relay ranch, basically a ranch where they can bring the horses from one place, rebrand them and clean them up and do whatever they got to do, and then move them. They need like a safe harbor, though. So they decide to rob a train to get money to buy a small ranch to work as a relay ranch. I'm learning about, I mean, you learn about this as you watch the movie. I didn't know what a relay ranch was when I watched this, and maybe it's not even a thing, but so his cohorts are Randy Quaid, and you go, shit, that's right, Randy Quaid's an amazing actor. Harry Dean Stanton, who's like one of my favorites ever, and he's got a sweet mustache. And what's his name? John B. Whatever his name is. God damn, I should remember. They're like, and one other guy. They're like their little outlaw gang, hole in the wall gang, you know. And they're awesome. They all have like their own characteristics and reasons for doing things. And Harry Dean Stanton is amazing. He's like a side character, but he's fully fleshed out. All the characters are actually. The performances and the writing in this, superb. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. So, you know, the relay ranch ends up being right on the border of a property that killed one of their gang members for stealing a horse. So you know that there's some reasoning to why he chose this exact location. And that guy, Braxton, who's like the head honcho, has all the horses and stuff, is like the bigwig in town. He hires a bounty hunter, Marlon Brando, who sometimes has an Irish accent, as a regulator, basically as a bounty hunter, to like take down anybody who's attempting to steal horses. So, and his name is Robert E. Lee Clayton, and he has this gun that can, shoot people from 500 yards away or whatever, which is, there's no honor in that. And that's basically, there you go. The other big aspect of the movie is that Jack Nicholson falls in love genuinely with Braxton's daughter. So there's like, everything is kind of tied together. But what I think is really great about this, and why I like the writing, and I feel like this movie is probably ahead of its time because it got very mediocre reviews. But I think that it's ahead of its time in that most Westerns are very predictable because of all the tropes and because we're used to. That's a problem with all genres, but especially Westerns kind of only have a couple directions they seem to be able to go, unless you bend the whole thing. And that's what happens, is that Westerns, they get, there's nothing really more we can do there, and then they tweak it. And this is one of those times where it's like kind of bends and goes in a different way. And it's not purely about like honor and justice and the American way and gunfights. It's not really like the focus of it. It's more about these like mundane moments and the small moments and the realism, and just the idea that frontier life was boring. It's not like a Western with all these things happening, and like a lot of decisions were made based on how friggin' boring it is there. So that's interesting, and it doesn't, you kind of think, I guess to sum up what I was saying, you kind of think where it's going to go after the first like 10 minutes, but then you realize like 30 minutes in, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like not in a way where you feel, because in a lot of movies, if that starts happening, you check out, you're like, I'm done. But everything is so well acted and the scenes are so interesting that you stay engaged, but you're like, I'm not really sure where this movie is going. Like, I couldn't tell you necessarily what the third act is going to be, which is very refreshing. If you watch a lot of movies, from like the first 20 minutes, if you've taken like one screenwriting course and one film history course, you can like kind of predict what's going to happen in a movie after watching the first like 20 minutes. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing, because, we've talked about it a million times. There's like only a handful of stories, but there's an infinite amount of permutations within that because of the details, because of who's telling the story and their own experience, and every person ends up being their own lens which the story is filtered through, and subsequently on the back end it gets filtered through the viewer's lens too, meaning that it can change the interpretation of the movie. And you might not get down with any of these characters and just be like, well, they're bad guys. They steal horses. Like, why do I give a shit, But I think if you look a little bit deeper, you'll see where that's coming from. Anyway, most of the gang eventually goes to Canada to try and steal a bunch of horses to bring down, to like use the relay farm. And that's like when the relationship between Jack and Kathleen Lloyd. It says introducing Kathleen Lloyd. I don't remember seeing her in anything else, but she's tremendous in this. Great. One of the best female performances and roles in this time period of Western for sure. Her and who's in Jane Fonda, I guess, right? Is in McCabe Miss Miller, which is so good. She being Miss Miller. So let's talk about Brando for a second. He's just so fucking fascinating to watch. He's always doing something. In the first scene, he's just tapping on his face, and you're like, what the fuck? And he pulls a guy out of his coffin of ice who's at a funeral, and he's like, you motherfucker. And then he takes some ice from the coffin and puts it in a rag and holds it, and he's like, my tooth is killing me. And you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? This couldn't have been written down. And so it turns out a lot of it wasn't written down, that he ad-libbed it. So he creates chaos and unpredictability, which like actually kind of leads to a lot of great moments. And you can tell that Arthur Penn was just like, I'm going to capitalize on those. And it's shown in several different ways, both in the performances, but then just like little moments, like happy accidents with animals or whatever that he keeps in. So it like ends up being a little bit of a motif. Like there's one part just during a conversation where the horse goes, and Jack starts the conversation over, and they like keep it there because it's a real thing. It's not like a Taxi Driver move. It's like what would really happen if you were talking to somebody and a dog barked and you went, hey, quiet down, and then you kept talking, Odie, can you be quiet for a second? I don't want that whistling going on in the background. Here, let me give you a little... You want this? By the way, Odie's doing much better. I think she's very happy that her whole mouth isn't full of decayed teeth. She seems to be a bit more spry and a little bit happier, so that's good. It's worth the fucking thousands of dollars that cost. Anyway, the editing is a bit sloppy, which is true of all Arthur Penn movies, but it doesn't really matter. He's not. It's not like cinematic in that sense. It's okay. Like the overarching pacing, I think, is good, but within scenes, there's sloppy edits, and it doesn't really matter. But it's what keeps these kind of movies from being like absolutely the top. There's an amazing scene between Brando and Nicholson where Brando's in a bathtub, and Nicholson shoots a hole in the bathtub, and you hear it pouring out, and then he swipes at the bubbles in the bubble bath. Like that Brando's in, he swipes at it and just all bubbles come, and he goes, you aren't even there. Like, oh my god, this is awesome. And it's like the classic shootout moment, but it takes place with a dude in a bathtub and a guy not getting shot, so it's like it's really turning the genre on its head. So I loved it. I loved the Harry Dean's backstory, and his character is so good, and I related to it a lot. What are you doing, you freak? You want to come over and say hi to the stream? Come here. Odie, come here a second. Come here. Come here. Why are you walking so cautiously towards me? Come here. Come here. So the movie, speaking of... What's up, Odie? Come on up. Speaking of animal cruelty, I guess there's a lot of animal cruelty in this movie. There's definitely a shot where they kill a rabbit. I was like, that's definitely a rabbit being killed. But in the next scene, they're eating it, and it looks like a real rabbit, so maybe they did kill and eat it, which is still, I don't know, frowned upon, but, it's a movie, and it's there forever. I'm not saying that that's a reason to abuse animals, and that is frowned upon, and I would never abuse an animal in a movie, I don't think, or in real life, hopefully. But I do eat them, so I don't know. That's a tough one. It's really, really good. And then they talk about this thing, this Thomas Jefferson idea of like, I'm a warrior so that my son can be a farmer, so that his son can be a poet, I'm going to let Odie out. Let that sink in. And I can like certainly relate to that because, you know, like on my dad's side, my grandfather was a cop, and my dad was a banker. So that I could be a YouTube guy. No, so that I could be a poet. I'm not saying I'm a poet, but you know, metaphorically, I can, like Friedrich the Mouse, collecting colors while everybody else toils. Okay. Yeah, it's really good. I would check it out. I mean, I think that it didn't do very well at the time. I understand why. It's a little bit more cerebral than a lot of Westerns. And I think that the unpredictability of Brando is probably just people like, what the fuck? And the movie was probably much cleaner shaped until he came in and started acting nutty. So, I mean, all those things factor in, but it feels like a sloppily edited Coen Brothers movie in terms of like the story and the character. Like I think maybe it has almost too much humanity to be a Coen Brothers movie, but maybe not enough humor. That's what changes it. But oh man, I thought it was really interesting, and I think that if you like westerns, it's definitely one to check out. Simply because the performances are just crazy good, you know. All right, let's keep working on this song from yesterday.